Okay, it's 12:01, so we will get things started here. I'll call the meeting to order, and to begin, I will say that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And with that, I will look to the committee to see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I am seeing none. I'll move to consent items. We do have, oh, sorry, Councillor Helmer. Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to say for 3.1, this is the unsanctioned street parties and the bylaw around cost recovery under the nuisance bylaw. I don't see anything in there that could necessarily pertain to my employer, Western University. But if there was something and it comes up in the discussion, I'd have to declare an interest on that.
Thank you, Councillor. So with that, I'll go to consent. I'm going to pull item 2.3 because there is a delegation request on that. And I wonder if any committee members would like to pull any other items. Councillor Sally.
I just want to make a comment on 2.5.
Okay, so comment, we won't pull it. Anything else? Councillor Lewis.
I just want to make a comment on 2.7, but not necessary to pull it.
Perfect. With that, I will ask for a motion to move all of consent except for 2.3. Moved by Councillor Sally, seconded by Councillor Pelosa, and I'll call the question. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Sally, you have a comment on 2.6.
2.5, correct. It's not specific to this one, but I just wanted to know if staff could let us know. I know sometimes it's impossible to do, but is it possible in future reports, I guess the next time this comes up in, I guess, 2023, where it's the London Heritage Council, the Arts Council, all those agreements, could it come just all at one time? I think it's sometimes, for me at least, it might be helpful to have them all in front of me at the same time, but just wondering if there's a reason why they come at piece.
Mr. Stafford?
Through the chair, yes, we'd like to do that as well. We just weren't quite ready with this particular agreement, and with the expiry dates, we wanted to make sure we got the other agreements on the table last week. So I do appreciate that, and we will endeavor to achieve that next time.
Is that good, Councillor?
Perfect, I'll see you in 2023.
Excellent. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I want to recognize that Chief Hamer is here from our London Fire Services. 2.7 is the expansion of naloxone kits to fire services. Folks will recall that we had a debate here about naloxone kits going into recreation facilities not that long ago. And I had commented at that time that we were getting the cart a bit before the horse, that we hadn't had them extended to all of our emergency services yet. I'm glad to see that this is coming forward. I want to thank the chief and frankly, every member of the London Fire Services. I know a great deal of work has gone into this to make it possible. And I know that by doing this, we're empowering our first responders to be in a position to better save lives. So just wanted to say that and thank the chief and all of her staff for the work that's gone into this.
Councillor Sully.
Thank you. And just to add on to Councillor Lewis, my question is I know it says the fire chief be authorized. I think for me, I don't understand why they need to be authorized. I think if you could just kind of maybe touch on that. I feel as if, you know, it sounds like an operational thing. And it makes sense to me that they would be able to just do that without us.
Through the chair, it's a change to the level of service, which is why we need to bring it here.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just speaking to item 2.4, thank you to staff with the city for working with Museum London. As a board member with Museum London, thank you for your work making sure that the operating endowment fund can be transferred to the London Foundation, and for your work on making this happen. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions, so I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving right along to item 2.3, the property standards related demolitions. We have on our added agenda a request for delegation status. And I'm wondering if somebody would like to make a motion regarding that request. Councillor Sully, what's your motion?
I guess, I'm not sure if they wanted to speak today, but I'm fine with doing that.
So Councillor Sully is moving that we grant delegation status for Mr. Kuzokria, and seconder from Councillor Hillier. Any comments? We'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so we have delegation from Mr. Kuzokria, and I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly. If you want to come to either that microphone up there or the one down below, you have 5 minutes to address, so there's one there and there's one there. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and councilors. I'm here to represent 8 Henry Street. It's been a 60-year nightmare, and we're hoping today to resolve this for us and for the city. So to save time, I think it's best that I just read it, and then hopefully if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer it. And okay, my name is Anthony Kuzakrea. My father, Dominic Kuzakrea, sold 8 Henry to Connaught family. My father took the first mortgage, approximately $12,000. Several months later, the people that bought it, the Connaughts, the entire family disappeared. My father hired his lawyer, Mr. Jen at the time, to deal with it. Unfortunately, Mr. Gent died in the process. So my father, with little education and experience in this area, was assumed that we could just take over the house. So we tried to rent it with no luck at all. It was getting ruined all the time. So we tried to sell it several years later. And of course, the city said we cannot sell it because we don't own the house, because the name was in Connaught's name. So we hired several lawyers in the next many years to try and resolve this with no luck. As I said, it was a 60-year nightmare. Yeah. We tried to, So we thought it's best that we hire Learners, which is as a well-known reputable company here. We didn't want to spend a lot of money, so we hired a junior lawyer with Learners, again with no luck whatsoever. It was said that it would be about $3,000 or $4,000 and probably months to resolve. Well, 5 years later, nothing happened. We were quite disappointed with the whole situation. I guess we accepted it as part of the nightmare. A year ago, they sent us a bill after 5 years for 4 times more than they estimated. And I was so depressed in dealing with this by this time that we did nothing. And then we were looking after any obstructions at the house. Sometimes we would get a notice, and we, of course, immediately, in a timely manner, took care of it. But about a year ago, we stopped getting notices, assuming that the owners were getting the notices. Well, of course, they did nothing, because they had about $300 put into this house. Sorry, I'm trying to speed up to make sure I get it done in the five minutes. So the Connaughts reappeared I'm sorry, I missed that part. The Canucks reappeared about 6, 7 years ago, talked to one of the brothers, the father had died. He said, no problem. I said, you've created a nightmare for us, about $150,000 cost. So the brother I spoke to said, no problem, we'll sign the house over. Made appointments for him to come in and do the paperwork, never showed up. 2 months later, we got a notice from a lawyer representing the Canucks. The Canucks made a proposal to sell the house and we'll split the money. Well, as you know, we couldn't possibly accept that. We had gone through approximately $150,000 of cost, and now they've got $300 invested in this house, and so, of course, we did not go along with it. And so that's when we also hired learners that I said earlier. So at this point, about a week ago, there was a notice on the house that it's going to be recommended to be demolished. We're here to see if we can work out a solution, help us, help the city for a 60-year nightmare. Now, we have someone here that's given us written offer to buy the home and do a lot of great work with it.
You have about 30 seconds left.
30 seconds. And so now we want to prove to the city that all we're asking for is time to get this ownership over. And is it possible to have someone that's, the lady here, Susan Day, that's looking at buying the home, giving us a written notice? Could I give her 30 seconds?
We've only granted a delegation status to you, sir.
Okay, well, anyway, I can speak on her behalf. They've promised that if we sell the house, they're looking to demolish it, leave the basement, build a beautiful home that would be a great solution for the city, for us, and finally get rid of a 60-year nightmare for our family.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So committee, now I'm going to go to staff to hear about, so there are a number of houses on the report today. So I'll go to Mr. Katolik.
Yes, thank you. A demolition order is the absolute last position we have on the properties that we have property standard issues with. This specific property, since 2012, we have taken 25 actions against the property under our property standards bylaw, vacant building bylaw, and yard lot maintenance bylaw. And just to provide some photographic evidence, this is the house at 8 Henry. Oh, there we go. So we've had numerous site inspections at this property, numerous orders that have gone with no response, and that's why the city took actions. And all our actions were put onto the property in terms of taxes. The property is in tax arrears, and no taxes have been paid on this property since November of 2016. Based on what we just heard from the gentleman in the gallery, we would agree to a 2-month extension for this property for a demolition permit by the current property owner or a new property owner, or a building permit within 2 months to fix the house. In speaking with the inspectors that were visiting this house over the last number of years, this house is probably on its last legs. Would probably make more economical sense to demolish the property and just use the lot and build anew.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. Any questions or comments from committee? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the chair to staff. Having heard, obviously we're here talking about recommendations to demolish, and having heard from the gentleman in the gallery about the proposed owner looking at demolishing the property as well, is it cheaper or faster if the city just demolishes it and then pass those costs on versus them trying to find their own person, the right permits going through it? Could we expedite and actually help the buyer in this situation by demolishing it and then passing the costs along?
Is it cheaper? I don't have an answer for that because we would tender this out because we're doing 5 properties, but we do a designated substance survey to make sure the demolition is done safe in accordance with the labor laws. So it might be cheaper for them just to do it themselves, but knowing the history of this property, I don't have an answer for that.
Anybody else? So, we have a staff report with a recommendation that the attached bylaw be introduced at the council meeting. Take all necessary actions to demolish buildings and structures, and then the addresses are listed. So given Mr. Katolik's information and staff's willingness to grant an extension of 2 months to the property owner to deal with the situation, I imagine the motion would therefore be an A and a B. A would be what's on the staff report with Henry included in there. So B would take Henry out. So the new motion would be A without Henry. The B would be to grant a 2-month extension to Henry Street, or?
Yes, that's correct. So just on page 9, you would just remove 8 Henry from the bylaw before you.
So we would have to adjust the bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Katolik. So I'm wondering if, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear, do we actually need a motion on the 2-month extension, or is that just an administrative direction?
You wouldn't necessarily need a motion, but if nothing happened in 2 months, then we would just come back.
So the motion will be with the properties listed minus 8 Henry, and it will say the revised attached bylaw, which will be included in the report for council. And who would like to move that? Councillor Lewis, and seconded by Councillor Hillier. So Mr. Kuzokrea, according to what what staff have recommended to us, 8 Henry Street will be taken off of this bylaw to allow the demolition of these houses to go forward. 8 Henry will not be included at this time, and staff are going to give you a reprieve of 2 months to allow you to settle all of the issues around the property, sell it to Ms. Day if that's what's going to happen, but make sure that everything that staff need you to do on this property gets done, or at least started within that 2-month time period.
Is it possible to ask for an extension longer? It's going to take some time to deal with this. We have to get it in our ownership.
So, Mr. Kuzokrea, I believe, since it's not technically in this motion right now, I would highly recommend that you contact staff and you work out those details directly with staff. Okay? Is that good? Great. So we have a motion. It's been moved and seconded. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, so we can call the vote. Can you say it into the microphone, please?
I'll support this, yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so moving right along, we are on to our scheduled items. Item 3.1 is a public participation meeting regarding unsanctioned and unsafe street parties, policy amendments, public nuisance bylaw, cost recovery. And before we go to the PPM, we have a staff presentation.
Thank you. This report was prepared by our office in conjunction with Western University Administration and their Students' Council. The issue of unsanctioned street parties is a concern not only in London, Ontario, but across many university, college towns throughout North America. And what has become is the sheer volume of people that attend these events has become a local public safety risk. So whether it's occupancy on the street or occupancy on the properties, there has been concerns with obstruction of first responders attending to these events. Houses, structures are built to consider certain occupancies and loads, and what's happening in these areas at these occupancies are causing a public safety issue. I have some photos from recent events, a floor collapsing at Clemson University and 30 people injured because of so many people dancing on the first floor. California Polytech, a roof collapses after there's 50 people on the roof. And most recently in Kingston, Ontario, St. Patrick's Day party last year, a roof collapsed because there were so many people on the roof. We reviewed all the city bylaws that could be applied to unsanctioned street parties, and there's a number of them: streets, public nuisance, property standards, sound, noise, and all these bylaws have current regulations that could be applied to address these issues. The public nuisance bylaw, we're recommending some amendments to it, but the other bylaws don't require any amendments. We are looking at the set fines that are associated with these bylaws. This is an administrative function. We will be applying to a senior regional judge to increase some of the fines, specifically obstruction of streets. We're looking at increasing that fine, hosting a nuisance party, littering on the street. We are recommending the maximum public nuisance fine be increased from $10,000 to $25,000. That is a bylaw amendment. That's the maximum fine. Obviously, on a first charge, the courts are not going to the maximum, but they are giving a percentage of the maximum. Operationally, we're also looking at the option of issuing summonses in place of Part 1 tickets. That is a process that's currently being used by the City of Kingston Police Services and by law enforcement. And what that means is that for certain events, and at certain times of the year, anybody that's in contravention of the bylaw needs to appear in court in place of just paying the ticket online or not paying the ticket at all. There is some additional provincial and federal legislation that could be applied to unsanctioned street parties: Liquor License Act, Fire Protection and Prevention Act, all the way to the criminal code for unlawful assembly or as a riot, as it's called. So we're focusing on cost recovery of the public nuisance bylaw. We're putting the onus on the owner and tenants to take all applicable actions to prevent and or clean up a nuisance party. And in the bylaw, we do note some examples of actions that could be undertaken by the owner or tenant, such as posting security on the property to restrict from trespassing, because we know that a lot of these properties are not having the parties by the owners or the tenants, but the properties are being trespassed by the persons on the street. Dealing with unreasonable noise, dealing with roof attendance, or roofing as we call it, where there's drinking going on at roofs, which is causing other actions to be taken on the roofs, like jumping off roofs, trying to break tables. Reducing the crowd size, both on the property and within the property. That's a function of first responders, specifically fire prevention officers, who need to attend these properties to reduce the occupancy of these properties while people are dancing on the first floor. And lastly, the cleaning up of the street after the streets get cleared. Where the property owners or tenants are directed to do something and they take no action, the city takes the action. And the amendment before you is to recover the costs of the actions by police, fire, and bylaw enforcement, by action to the tenants, or onto the property taxes of the owners. We also make note in the bylaw amendment that where there's reasonable actions taken to prevent these events, there will be no cost recovery. Lynn Logan, Vice President of Operations and Finance, is here with us today, and she'd be available to answer any questions with what Western administration is doing to address this issue. They are looking at their code of conduct, the scope and jurisdiction, looking at different strategies and communications on consequences. And Mitch Pratt, President of the Students' Council, is also here, and he'd be able to answer any questions with respect to what the Students' Council is doing to offer a safe alternative to these events. Moving forward, we're looking at working with Western on a Get Involved London site where the public can make comments on this issue. We will be moving into operational planning with all first responders, and we'll be focusing on communications of consequences. Because really, once we have the operational plan in place, we have to do a very good job in communicating the consequences of non-compliance. Because we know that this isn't, although it's on the doorstep of Western University, we do know that bus loads come in from all over Ontario and parts of the United States to attend these events. So we need to use various social media and other forms of communications to clearly indicate what the consequences of non-compliance should be during these events. I'd be happy to answer any technical questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patolik. Any technical questions from committee? Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about the one slide where you talked about security and trespassing as part of an action. And how I understood it, what you were saying was, is the expectation that private residents would hire security companies for their property as a way to ensure that they weren't subject to the cost recovery? Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, that's correct. That's being used in other cities where a property owner will hire a private security company to ensure that nobody is trespassing onto the property, be it that the tenants are holding a small event and want to ensure that only the people invited to the party are going to the party, or if the house is vacant and they don't want anybody trespassing on their property.
So just to clarify, so are we directing private residents to have to hire someone, or is that a suggestion? I just want to be clear, because
Through the chair, it's a suggestion.
Any other comments from committee? Questions, technical questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Mr. Katolik. First of all, I'm very supportive of raising the maximum fine. I think that that's a very strong message. I'm wondering why the fine for hosting is actually only being recommended to be increased from $750 to $1,000. That to me seems like, honestly, a rather small increase and not one that acts as a deterrent or, given the numbers that we've seen, even helps us with cost recovery. So I'm wondering why that figure seems low.
Through the chair, that's the maximum a set fine could be. So that would be on a ticket. If you receive a summons, a Part 3 summons, the maximum we are recommending is $25,000.
Any other technical questions? I'll go to our guests. Any technical questions? Okay, so I'll look for a motion then to open the PPM. Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Sully.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So the public participation portion of the meeting is now open. If there are any members in the gallery that would like to speak to this issue of the unsanctioned and unsafe street parties, and specifically the public nuisance bylaw, come to the microphone, state your name if you're comfortable, state your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of council, and staff. My name is Joe Hoffer. I did provide a written submission, which hopefully you've had an opportunity to read. I'm here to represent the interests of the London Property Management Association, and I had said 500 members. It's actually in excess of 600 members. And LPMA is the oldest landlord organization in the province of Ontario. LPMA maintains high standards of professionalism and education for its members. The lease terms that have been drafted by LPMA are used by landlord associations across the province. And they're very concerned to maintain professionalism among their members, and they're also concerned about the activities that occur at these unsanctioned parties, nuisance parties as described in the bylaw. And the concerns aren't so much with the fine levels, it's who the fines are directed at. And as expressed in the submission that was given to you, this is a bylaw which purports to make an individual responsible for the actions of a third party. So if you had a house on Broughdale and the owner, you enacted a bylaw that says, well, you owner, if you don't do something about your neighbor hosting a party, we're going to make you liable to pay a fine or to pay the costs of recovery, that kind of thing. I think the reason why it seems to be acceptable here is because landlords are being targeted, and that's an easy target for bylaws. But secondly, because there seems to be an assumption built in to the bylaw amendment that landlords can control the behavior of tenants. And that assumption is fundamentally flawed. The landlord's relationship with their tenants is governed entirely by the Residential Tenancies Act, which is provincial legislation, superior legislation to municipal legislation. And under the Residential Tenancies Act, when a landlord gives a tenant possession of a home or a rental unit, they give them all of the ownership rights except for a few residual ownership rights, mainly title to the property and the right to retake the property in certain limited circumstances. But what they absolutely prohibit the landlord from doing is controlling the conduct of a tenant. And this bylaw, when you read Appendix A and some of the things that landlords are expected to do, if a landlord were to purport to issue a no trespass notice to anybody from coming on the property, the landlord would be found in breach of its statutory obligation not to interfere with the tenant's reasonable enjoyment. There's a clear case from the divisional court, which I referenced and which I'm sure your legal department can pull up if they need it. But it was an outrageous situation where the landlord issued a no trespass notice and was found liable for interfering with the tenant. The other suggestion is the landlord themselves go onto the property and try to prevent whatever's going on. First of all, quite apart from the personal safety risk, landlords are prohibited from entering the property unless they give 24 hours written notice with some particulars as to when they're going on. And these are just two examples that are taken directly from the appendix. When I went through that list of things that were deemed to be reasonable, all but one of them are illegal under the Residential Tenancies Act, and therefore the effect of the bylaw is to compel landlords to do something illegal, and that's repugnant. I did suggest in the correspondence to this committee that LPMA would be willing to work with the city to develop a schedule that would go with the rental application and lease and would go with the guarantee form that highlights for tenants the fact that if they engage in these activities on the property, that would give rise, for example, to grounds for termination of the tenancy. But that's as far as the landlords can legally go. They always are put in a position of having to react, whether it be illegal conduct or conduct that impairs the safety of others. It's always a reactive system. And you've all heard horror stories about landlords with bad tenants and they can't get them out, and those stories are accurate. It can take weeks, if not months, to get someone out, even though they're engaged in clearly, I'll call it unlawful behavior. The police can act more quickly, the fire service can act more quickly, but landlords are constrained. And so we're asking that you decline to approve the amendment. As I said, we'd be willing to work with your legal department and with Mr. Katolik's office to come up with a schedule that would at least address the concerns. And if we make it clear to the guarantors, that has a huge effect on the kids.
Great. Thank you. Almost exactly 5 minutes, so very good timing. Any other members of the public care to speak to this? Come to the microphone, state your name, and you have about 5 minutes.
Sorry. Yes. My name is Dan Schaefer. I live at 1882 Bayswater Crescent, London, Ontario.
Can you get a little bit closer to the
Sure.
microphone, sir? Thank you.
Okay. Did you get the name and address? Okay. I would like to take this time to address concerns I have with the proposed amendment to the bylaw PH 18 as the bylaw to prohibit and regulate public nuisances within the City of London. First off, I'd like to respectfully suggest that the City of London consider a few items and consider maybe a more proactive direction to this issue. I would like to see the City of London embrace the student population within its borders, and it would be great to see them reinitiating something like the Homecoming Parade, which was always such a great family event. The City of London has events come to town, such as the recent Junos, where they have embraced and celebrated these events. Normal rules are changed, and it's a celebration. Homecoming could be just the same as that in London. I would like to see this Western University move homecoming date back to September, thus eliminating fake homecoming and this whole discussion we're having. It's really that easy. Remove homecoming back to its original date. Fake homecoming will probably continue until the date is moved back to the original. If other universities, sorry, I'm choking up. If other universities all had the same homecoming date, this could help limit the students traveling from homecoming to homecoming, as addressed already. Some of this is going to be repeating what Joe just said, but in the recommendation to the Community and Protective Services for this meeting, there was an example listed of the University of Western Virginia, where they took over what had been an unsanctioned party and have changed this into the university's fall festival. This has been very successful and has turned what was a problem into a controlled, safe, and fun event. Collaboration was needed between the university, police, and citizens over several years to change the culture. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to look at success stories, such as Western Virginia, and see how fake homecoming can be turned into homecoming and into an event that the city can celebrate with. As both a landowner and a landlord within the City of London, I have a number of concerns with the proposed amendments. Both with the overregulated, repressive tone of the bylaw as well as the content, which, as will be shown, is in direct contravention with existing and superseding laws in Ontario. Currently, the proposals to amend bylaw PH 18 are in direct opposition to, as well as the intent of, both the Residential Tenancy Act and the Ontario Human Rights Commission. The proposed bylaw is a direct contravention of the Residential Tenancy Act. Section 22 states a landlord cannot interfere with the reasonable enjoyment of its tenants. Section 23 states a landlord cannot harass, obstruct, coerce, threaten, or interfere with a tenant. Section 25 states a landlord may enter a rental unit only with a proper notice, as in Section 26 and 27 of the Residential Tenancy Act. A landlord cannot stop tenants from having guests, require a tenant to notify the landlord, or to get the landlord's permission before having guests. The landlord cannot charge extra fees to the guest in the rental unit, as this has been deemed harassment in past rulings. However, the tenant is responsible for the behavior of the guests within the tenant unit and or on the property. Based on the information above, Sections 4A, Sections 1, 2, and 3, and Section 4 are all in direct contravention of the Residential Tenancy Act. As shown above, a landlord in the province of Ontario or in the City of London does not have the right to comply with the undefined reasonable actions listed in Section 4A, such as to hire security personnel to prevent or limit number, age, sex, or religion of any visitors entering into the property or onto the premises, or to require any visitors who do not live on the premises to vacate the property. This is a contravention of the Residential Tenancy Act. In fact, the landlord would be liable and to be charged on the Residential Tenancy Act if they were engaged in such illegal activities.
You have about 30 seconds left.
Okay. As I'd mentioned before, there were a number of conditions that are not legal. So I'm going to end with mom and pop London landowners who are supplementing their retirement through the provision of good, quality, safe rental accommodation should not continually have to fend off ill-advised proposals from the City of London, such as amendments to bylaw PH 18. Thank you for the time listening to me. I trust you will consider what has been presented and take this proposed amendment back for further review. Just as important, please take time to reconsider a change of tone and increased regulation that you have to one of collaboration within the City of London, and strongly consider my suggestion to pursue with Western the return of homecoming to its original date with the concept of City of London Homecoming Celebration event for further years.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. Anybody else in the gallery would like to speak to this issue? I'm looking left to right. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, my name's Marie Blosh. And I apologize for my voice. I've been sick for the last week, so I hope it'll hold out. So I probably won't be able to talk for the full 5 minutes. But I want to begin by saying that, I've lived in this neighborhood for over 18 years, and I've been involved in neighborhood issues for that entire time. And, landlords have never been at the table. They've never come and talked about the problems or brainstormed solutions with us. They only come around when there's some pecuniary interest. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So, to the extent that Mr. Hoffer mentioned, they'd be willing to sit down and talk about putting something in the lease, I'm glad to hear it. But I'd like to see more involvement, and not just when there's a fine being proposed. I'm also kind of surprised to see them waving the Residential Tenancies Act around as if that gives them immunity from any kind of liability. That act is meant to give an unequal relationship between a landlord and a tenant a little more balance, and give some protections to the tenant, and because they're the weaker party. It's not an immunity for landlords from any kind of liability or responsibility. All property owners, myself included, we all have a duty to maintain our properties in a way that doesn't create negative effects or nuisances. And you don't avoid that by saying, I'm a landlord, and the Residential Tenancies Act says I can't do things. For example, they'd say, well, we have to give 24 hours notice, so therefore we can't go on the property. Well, we all know when this street party is going to happen. So give the 24 hours notice. It's really not that hard. The bottom line is that, absentee owners in Buffdale are running businesses. And the nuisance caused by these businesses is being paid for by the taxpayers. And we area residents are also suffering the loss of quiet enjoyment of our properties. And in effect, we're all just subsidizing these businesses. And it's time for it to end. And I'm happy to see this bylaw. I think it's a step in the right direction. And I ask you to not water it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blosh. Anybody else? I'm looking back and forth in the gallery. Last chance, if you'd like to speak to this issue, come to the microphone. And with that, I will look to committee to close the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Sully, seconded by Councillor Pelosa.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So with that, I will open it up for discussion. Look to committee. Any members have anything to say? I look to our guests. Wow. No questions, no comments. Councillor Hillier.
Yes, through the chair, to probably legal for this. I'm curious if we amended the bylaw on 4A for 1 and 2 by eliminating the word owner, would that satisfy the Landlord-Tenant Act? Would that satisfy our requirement? Sorry, not putting us in legal jeopardy?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think I prefer to give any legal advice in camera. I would indicate that there may be owners who actually who live on the property, and if you remove that, then you would remove the ability to impose those costs against the actual owner of the property who may live at the property and have a nuisance party. What I might suggest to the committee, through you, Madam Chair, is a further report. I could take Mr. Hoffer's comments, the issues that he has raised, and the case law that he has provided, provide you with a written report in camera that sets out those legal issues and addresses those issues, if that would be your preference.
Wondering, would that be available at council next week?
In order to do the sufficient work on it and have it properly researched, I would prefer something a little later than that. And I'm wondering, I was consulting with other members of Civic Admin in terms of holidays. Would May 28th be an appropriate date?
So committee, legal is advising that they can provide us with a written report in response to public submission, and suggesting a May 28th date for report back. Councillor Squire.
Two things. First of all, the dates when, through you, Madam Chair, when unsanctioned street parties are most prevalent, just finished with St. Patrick's Day. So I don't think we're in any real jeopardy of this becoming an issue. I can say from experience that in Ward 6, where this usually happens, it's more prevalent in the fall, homecoming, through to St. Patrick's Day. So I think, I don't think the time is a huge issue. But I do think Mr. Hoffer's raised legal issues about the enforceability of the bylaw, and those have to be addressed. And I think it's only fair to Mr. Hoffer and others, to landlords, to address those particular issues and say, well, is this an enforceable bylaw? Because I don't think any of us are going to be happy to find out we passed a bylaw that we can't enforce. And quite frankly, some valid points have been raised about the landlord-tenant relationship that I think do need to be reviewed legally. So that would be my suggestion.
Thanks, Councillor. Anyone on committee? Do Mr. Katolik or Mr. Kotsevas have any comment?
We would concur with the position of legal to have a legal response back. We've been working with LPMA on this issue, and we actually see LPMA as a partner, as looking for a solution to this. So we want to get it right. Another 2 months will not impact any fall events.
So, Mr. Katola, would you be looking to refer this back to staff so that Civic Administration can continue to consult with LPMA and other stakeholders, and so that legal can provide with an in-camera report in response to these issues?
We would concur.
Councillor Lewis, and then Councillor Salih.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear from Councillor Squire actually his indication that his concern is more towards the fall. I will be honest, I had a little bit of concern about delay in terms of the fact that as we approach the end of year, we also run into move-out parties. However, I'm hearing from him that that's not so much the level of party that we're talking about here. So my concern is that we have this back and in place before the fall. So I'm happy to support a referral at this time, but both to staff and to those interested members of the public, I want to be clear that when this comes back, we'll be making a decision, and it'll be going, I suspect it will be going forward, because residents in the area have been waiting years for action to be taken, and I don't really feel it's fair to ask for them to wait any longer. So when this does come back, I would encourage my colleagues and everyone involved to be prepared to make a decision.
Councillor Salih.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really like the idea of, waiting 2 months, but I appreciate if legal is saying that they need that much time. I could try to be flexible. I'm just trying to look at our calendar. This is the only April meeting we have, correct, for CAPS?
Yes.
Correct. So, yeah, so I guess that's kind of, so then we're looking, so we don't have anything in early May as far as CAPS meetings? Sorry, I know I'm not trying to talk about the schedule right at the meeting.
I can check with clerks. Generally, we meet once a month, but let me check. Councillor, there's a meeting on April 30th.
So I guess I'd look to legal and to staff to say if there's a meeting on April 30th, my preference would be then. I know closer to May, a lot of Western students, maybe their representatives might not be in town. So I just wanted to also have the opportunity that students have an opportunity, if there is a public participation meeting with it, to have that opportunity to also be here as well. So I'm not sure if April is doable. No?
I'm seeing from staff that April's not doable. Also, I'm not sure that we would require another PPM. Mr. Kotsovas, you look like you have something to say.
Through the chair, as our colleague in legal had mentioned, there's vacations and some timing issues that we need to address internally, and that's why the April date is we can't get back to. The May one was more suitable, and it does not necessitate a PPM, although if your preference is to have one, that is open to you.
Right. So, Councillor, I think also, especially having heard from Councillor Squire, who generally witnesses and experiences this situation firsthand in his ward, that there is no problem with the May 28th date. Also, I believe it gives our staff more time to consult with the LPMA and any other stakeholders that have concerns with this bylaw or want their input into this bylaw. Councillor Squire.
I don't want to be put into this situation as if I'm fine with a delay in the bylaw. This is top of list issue for me. Let me tell you what my concern is. Some legal issues have been raised with the enforceability of this bylaw. Legal counsel has said, they're saying we need time to examine those concerns. What we want is an enforceable bylaw. If legal counsel outside of this building thinks our bylaw is not enforceable, they're going to start legal action the first time we take action, and it will be a lot longer than 2 months. It'll be years before we get an answer. So I think it's great as a politician to say, I want action today, I want it done today. That's great, it probably sells well, but what I want is a bylaw that works and a bylaw that's enforceable. And if that takes 2 months, then I'm happy with 2 months.
All right, anybody else? So soon, there will be a motion on your screens that you can take a peek at, and I'll be looking for someone to move or suggest something different. It should be up now for your perusal. If you scroll to the bottom, it will be the one at the bottom. Mover? Councillor Hillier? Councillor Salih, you have a comment or a question? Do I have a second? I'll second it. Do you have a comment?
No, I was going to say.
Okay.
You beat me to it.
I'm just trying to move things along. Any other questions or comments? Then we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So, for those interested, that was referred back to Civic Administration for some more consultation and also for a legal report in response to the letter from LPMA and their legal representatives. We're moving along now to item 3.2, which is the Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee, and we have Ms. Hussain here to speak to committee about this report. Go ahead. Speak right into the microphone, please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Through the chair, we had a DIAC meeting last month, and one of our colleagues, a resource member, had invited one of his colleagues who is the founder of Here for Her, and she had proposed an initiative that's already been implemented by the Thames Valley District School Board in some of their schools, if not all of the schools, as well as the City of Toronto, about providing free menstrual products to all city property. So without taking up too much time, I would like to invite Rachel Ettinger to come in to speak about the Here for Her initiative.
Go ahead, Ms. Ettinger.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm very passionate about this topic, so I will try to keep it very concise. So firstly, for all individuals that menstruate, we've all had a time at all ages where we weren't prepared for the situation. And so chances are we were embarrassed, ashamed, and we went home. If we're lucky, the bathroom where we are at work or at school has a dispenser, and maybe we pay $4 for the product there, and we're hopefully on our way. I'm going to talk a little bit about why menstruation is an equity issue. It is our health, and we shouldn't be penalized for it. So moving forward, we're asking about having menstrual products provided for free in community-owned buildings. It's interesting because menstrual products are seen as luxury items, whereas paper towel and toilet paper are seen as necessity items. Anybody here who menstruates knows that menstruation is not a luxury. It's interesting, though, just the verbiage of that. We have to change that dialogue and challenge these norms. The stigma is very real for menstruation. It's something that all individuals, not just limited to females, just individuals who menstruate can experience. And we have a huge issue here in London as well with those being able to afford menstrual products. I'll mention quickly a school initiative in a second, but here in London, I know doing all the work with Here for Her, going into shelters, the food bank even says it's one of their biggest items, requested items every month is menstrual products. We have an issue here, and this is something where it's dignity, it's pride, it's how somebody feels about themselves. They shouldn't have to choose between food and a menstrual product. That is an equity, again, that is an equity issue. And I want to bring up, there's so many things we could go into, but one really positive initiative with Thames Valley District School Board last year and my full-time job, Virgin Radio, and Tampon Tuesday as well, we joined forces, and Thames Valley District School Board now provides free menstrual products in all of their high schools and also in alternate education classrooms in the gender-neutral bathrooms, which is huge. And this is something that is happening all across Canada. A school board in Alberta is doing this, and of course, as we mentioned, the City of Toronto put $200,000 of funding, just I think 2 months ago they announced it, for community-owned buildings in Toronto, drop-in centers, shelters, buildings, facilities to provide free menstrual products. And I mean, that is a huge amount of money, but it's happening. And it's, I think 5 years from now, we'll get to a place where it's not just schools that are jumping on board, which they are, but also cities. And wouldn't it be awesome if London was progressive and a pioneer in this matter? Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Sully, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's important. I'm very supportive. I see that there's a recommendation here, and there's, I guess, a A and a 1 and a 2 and a B and a C, if I'm not mistaken. And the one I think that the speaker is speaking today is Civic Administration be requested to explore the option of providing free menstrual products in the City of London facilities as a pilot project. I mean, me personally, I'm supportive of doing that today, but I know my colleagues like to get numbers. I guess what I want to ask maybe our staff is if they have some sort of kind of initial kind of feedback on that, if that's something that we can do, as well as if we were to explore this, would we connect with the health unit to see if there's opportunities to tap into other funding from different levels, perhaps from government, to support this. So just wanted to put that on the floor, but happy to move the motion as that's exactly what you guys want us to do. I mean, I'm prepared to go all the way right now, but I'm going to respect the will of, the speaker and the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Stafford or Ms. Livingston? Sorry.
One voice. I think it's fair to say that at least for community centers, aquatic facilities, arenas, we're prepared to move forward now and report back on what the cost might be. The recommendation refers to all City of London facilities, so you may be looking for a broader direction than initially our community centers, aquatic facilities, and arenas.
Councillor Salee.
So I guess maybe if, because it seems like maybe there's a question in there to clarify, I guess. So are we looking for, I guess, the speaker, are we looking, can you clarify, are we looking for every community center, or if that's allowed, Madam Chair? I just want to clarify the intent.
Yeah, a lot of the schools, so King's, Western, all these pilot projects, we're calling them pilot projects that are happening right now, but City of Toronto is funding to all city-owned facilities. That's their wording. And then they explain it as drop-in centers, shelters, I'm missing, arenas, thank you. So that's how they're positioning it. Personally, I think if anything we can do as a pilot project, whether that's certain arenas, that would be amazing. I think it's a foot in the door and it's a start, and that would make London ahead of the game, honestly, and right behind Toronto.
Ms. Livingston?
Through the chair, so it's a question of public facing or all buildings. That's really the question. What I was trying to say is we're very prepared to move forward with our public facing buildings, which would include our arenas and community centers and aquatics, and I'm assuming we would have to talk to our colleagues in facilities about this building versus work yards, inside offices, those kinds of things where the public aren't. So I'm prepared to, we're prepared to move forward now with the public-facing buildings and report back on the cost. If you'd like us to be broader, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to be clear about what we're supposed to do.
So, no, thank you very much for that, Ms. Livingston. So to the delegates, so there are public-facing buildings that are open to the general public.
Yes.
Then there are city-owned buildings like City Hall.
Yes.
So I know what I think personally.
Personally, I would like to propose it to all city-owned buildings. All city-owned property.
Right. So, Councillor Salee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to wrap up on my opportunity to speak. So I'm supportive of, as they made it very clear, their intent. So I'm happy to move that motion as is, where it's all London City facilities. I do want to say, as we're having this discussion, I know in the past, for example, when we talked about naloxone and we wanted to head in a pilot project, we went through this. And then when it came back, committee had a different perspective at that point. So I just want to remind us that, if we're heading in this, it does sometimes give the impression to the public that we're supportive of this. So I am supportive of this in principle, and I am supportive of regardless of the price tag for me. But I just wanted us to kind of be conscious of that as we're deliberating today. So I'll move that recommendation.
Great. So Councillor Salee would like to move the recommended motion from DIAC, and I'll go to Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here in this space with us today. Just to update you on a recent encounter that I had into those on council and in the public of our new Boswick Community Center. Was in there for hockey on the weekend, and there was no dispensaries, period. In a brand new facility, the Service London desk was closed, the library desk was closed, and when I made an inquiry of said product to the YMCA desk, they also had nothing. Luckily, this time I wasn't in need of a product, but was thinking as we showcase our wonderful new facilities to tourists coming in from out of town, that you can't even get a basic staple. And for women who need it, or anyone menstruating who need it, it is a needed product. And I'm pleased to say that will be going in, the YMCA said, into the washrooms within the next week. And certainly even here at City Hall, we have them, they're available, but you need a coin to get one. I don't carry a purse on me. I don't carry coins. I would have to go back and search or ask my colleagues to spot me a couple bucks or whatever the going rate is for probably a subpar product out of said machine. So I thank you for bringing this forward. Certainly I am supportive of it, and I don't know how other cultures take it, that you'd have to start divulging what you need to a man at a desk or a young teenager or whoever you need, or with kids in tow, or while trying to use a YMCA that you're in need of a tampon before you can use the swimming pool. So thank you. It is an equity issue. It is an accessibility issue of things that are just a basic staple for women. So thank you for championing for that.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Great. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would echo a lot of what my colleague Councillor Pelosa has just said. I think that this is really something that's a bit of a no-brainer, and I very much appreciate what you said about we don't look at toilet paper or paper towels as a luxury, and nor should we look at menstrual products as a luxury either. To me, you know, this is the second time today I've said we got the cart ahead of the horse a little bit when we were talking about naloxone kits in rec centers, and we don't even have dispensaries for menstrual products. It comes down to a matter of priorities, and I'm happy to support this. I just wonder if my colleague, Councillor Saleh, might be willing to look at this as a friendly amendment, because I hear what our staff is saying in terms of the public facing, and because we're looking at this as a pilot project, if we might want to split this into civic administration be requested to explore the option of providing free menstrual products in public-facing City of London facilities as a priority for a pilot project, and then add a clause and report back on all other city facilities and I will look to staff and see if there's any sort of nodding of heads. I don't know if you could maybe get this back to us by like Q3 or Q4 of this year for the other facilities. I know that you need some time to do some work on this. I don't want to hold back the public-facing facilities while we research the non-public facing facilities is really what I'm trying to get at.
The mover is indicating no to that, but I will hear back from staff on what their response to Councillor Lewis's comments.
My turn. Yeah, we can look at Q3 for a response on this, and it's what we had in mind. We were thinking of the public facing, the community centers, arenas, and whatever. And there's roughly, I believe, 300 city-owned buildings. So it's looking at all of those to make practical sense of this as well. Thanks.
Councillor Hillier.
Sorry, through the chair, just wondering if a friendly amendment, I was exploring Sean Lewis's train of thinking, and looking at the amendment in I, providing free menstrual products in the City of London publicly accessible facilities. Would that small change make it easier to move a pilot project forward?
Yes, that's fine, through the chair. Thanks.
Councillor Saleh.
Just, if I may, because I know my colleagues asked me on a couple occasions, my intent is to support the direction that was brought before us. They made it clear that it was all facilities. If we're saying that this is an equity issue, we're saying this is something that should be done, and then I think we just need to make it accessible for everyone across the city. So I can appreciate that we want to figure out how it is or how successful it will be. I think it's like it was said before, it's a no-brainer, it's needed, so let's just do it. Like I said, I was even prepared to just go ahead and put them in all the places. We have toilet paper in every single building, so let's just do it.
Thank you, Councillor. And I do want to point out to committee that the recommendation from the DIAC committee is that civic administration be requested to explore the options. So we're not talking about going, even though Councillor Saleh would love to see this happen, as would I. We're not talking about going out today and putting these products in all of the facilities, but it's explore the option of providing them. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm hoping I'm going to provide some clarification to my colleague, Councillor Saleh. I absolutely support all facilities. The reason that I was hoping you might be amenable to a split is because I hear staff saying they're ready to pursue the public facing right now without a lot of research. They could come back to us fairly quickly. I don't want to hold that up while they look at the non-public facing facilities and what the terms and costs of that might be. So for me, it's not a question of whether or not we do it all. It's a question of getting them into the public facilities as soon as possible, because I think that this is a huge gap, and then giving staff the time that they need to come back to us with the non-public facing facilities that we own. I absolutely agree with you, Councillor, that we should do them all, I just think that we can do some faster if we split them.
So to civic administration, given that the motion is be requested to explore the option, would exploring the option in public facing versus all, is there a difference in timeline for that?
Through the chair, I think the distinction is, because explore the option means I'm coming back to you with a report. So if that's what you would like me to do, we're very happy to do that. And we can do a report on what it will cost to implement it in all city facilities. We can do that. If you would like us to take action on the public-facing facilities now and direct us to do that and report back on the cost while we report back to you on the cost of the other facilities, that's also a direction you could send us in.
So Councillor Salee, that is an intriguing and interesting thought. Go ahead with public facing, continue to explore the option and provide cost on all. What do you say to that, my dear councillor?
Well, I think you guys know I'm always down to do things right away, so that's what it sounds like. So we're supporting that, so thank you for clarifying, Councillor Lewis. So I'm assuming someone will be seconding that motion with that language that's amended. And I just want to look maybe to the right to just make sure that the members who brought this forward are on board, and just want to make sure they're.
So Councillor Salee would love to move that as a friendly amendment. Move ahead, take action on providing free menstrual products in publicly facing buildings and explore the option of providing free menstrual products in all city facilities. And as chair of this committee, I would be absolutely thrilled to second Councillor Salee's motion. Are there other comments? Oh, you have more comments, Councillor Salee.
It's not a comment, but I just want to make sure, since we are doing that though, staff in that same report will let us know how much the cost is of us implementing the now, right? Just wanna
Absolutely.
make
I'm
sure.
seeing nods from both Ms. Livingston and Mr. Stafford that is precisely what they will do. Are there any other comments or questions from committee? Councillor Pelosa.
Sorry, just a question through staff or to our guest speaker today. If there's any direction of both kinds of menstrual products, your idea is to have tampons
Yes.
and pads available?
Yep, there are certain individuals for cultural, religious, trauma reasons where they don't use tampons and only use pads. We could go into that in more detail, and perhaps if you would like, we're available to chat about things that schools have done in the past in terms of dispensers versus baskets, like how the products are presented. We have a little bit of experience with that, but yes, both products being available is extremely important.
Thank you. That was just clarity for staff as they move forward of going to supply both.
Any other comments? Councillor Salee.
I just want to say 3 words, just because I know there's such a stigma with it, and I think it, maybe as a man, maybe I should try to be a better ally. So, and I know she has a great shirt on, so I want to say the words period, period, period. Thank you.
I want to know where I can get a t-shirt like that, actually.
I'll hook you up.
Any other comments? I would love to make a few comments from the chair. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for bringing this. I know I had seen a YouTube video a little while ago about, I believe is the Aboriginal student trustee on the Thames Valley School Board, who spoke as eloquently as you have today about this issue. And it's something that we just overlooked because we accept that it's always been this way.
Yes.
I have 2 daughters, and one is a teenager, one is almost a teenager, or has been a teenager since birth, really. And the new generation are completely different from how I was as a girl. We kept this to ourselves. We were very quiet about it. You did not ever want anyone to know that you were on your period, and God help you if you had an accident. And I've never had to go out and about in the city and carry toilet paper in my purse. Never. And the fact that we've always done this and always accepted that this is the way it is doesn't mean that it's the way it should always be. And I just think, I think it's a wonderful initiative. I think it's something we definitely need to move forward with. I also want to remind people of my era or older, when the Conservative government under Brian Mulroney first introduced the GST, they made certain necessity items exempt from GST. and feminine products were not one of them. And it was only in 2015 that the federal government exempted feminine hygiene products from HST, viewing them as a necessity of life for fully half the population, if not more. So wonderful. We've got a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. If there are any other comments, go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to pick up on one of your comments, just so folks are aware. The effort to remove the HST from feminine hygiene products took 8 years. 8 years of members of Parliament fighting and pushing forward, including London's own MP Irene Matheson. Let's not let this take 8 years. Let's get this done in, maybe 8 weeks. Maybe I'm being a little ambitious, but
No, you're not.
let's beat the federal government's record by a substantial number of years.
Wonderful. And I'm told that the revised motion is up for review. We're just revising that to add the report back on the cost. I'm told the revised motion is up. Are you good with that motion, Councillor Sully? Yes. Okay, then I believe I can call the vote now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Great. So we move to items for direction, and there are none. Deferred matters, additional business. Other than is there a deferred matters list? Yeah. Oh, there's the deferred matters list. So if anybody has a question or comments on that, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank staff for working with me on deferred item number 1, the request for the naming of Vimy Ridge Park. We'll be meeting to talk about the final phase of the public consultation on this later this week, and hopefully before the end of Q4 this year, we'll be able to take this off the list.
Great. So we need a motion to receive the deferred matters list, moved by Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Lewis. We can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any additional business? I see none. I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Hillier, I guess. And we can vote. We're going to vote manually on that. Show of hands. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I think he's been typecast and he's trying to break out of that.